Hi guys, how are you? Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
That a yes? Okay, good. All right. Hello. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. And a couple of things. I've got a checklist that's in the drive. I'm sure you guys know everything that I say is in the drive is in the drive. So it's called Contract to Close Checklist. I'm going to quickly run down this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrea and Ann, and I'll step aside and have you guys come up. So thanks guys for coming today. So we have Ann Presley here. She is the transaction coordinator for KW Legacy and Elevate. And then I also invited Andrea from upstairs from Stonegate. And so she'll talk to you guys a little bit about the process once they get the file and what they need from you and when they need it and that kind of stuff. And then we'll roll into questions at the end. All right, Paige, there's a piece of paper we're following here. So if you want to come grab that.
That's the last one we have.
Oh, perfect. No, we're all okay. If anyone else comes, I'll give them mine. All right. So you can actually print this contract to close checklist out. It's in the drive. You can also create tasks in your dot loop if you like to do that. There we go. I can see you then. A lot of people like to keep things all together in dot loop, and therefore then you can just check it done as you go. Or if you have a paper file, maybe something like this is something that you'd want to staple inside of your file folder so that you know you can keep yourself on track. Because there's a lot of things that happen from the time that you go under contract till close. Many of you have heard me say before, 80% of what we do happens from the time we go under contract, whether that be working with a buyer or a seller. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly read through these and talk about anything that you have questions about, and then we'll turn it over to Andrea and Ann. All right, so once you have all your paperwork fully signed, a couple things I want to mention. This has come up a couple times lately. We don't ever go back and change the purchase agreement once it's fully signed. So once you have everything signed by the buyer, by the seller, everything's initialed, ready to go, and then suddenly someone wants to change something, we don't ever go back and change the purchase agreement that's fully signed. That's handled on an addendum or a contract modification. So for example, and I don't remember who it was, I talk to so many of you every day. I can't remember who I spoke to yesterday, but it was a situation where the wife needed to be added to the contract because they didn't say they were married and the agent didn't ask prior to, and the wife needed to be added. Or I think Ying has a situation where her buyer said he was pre-approved and he actually wasn't pre-approved. So they got under contract somehow on a property without the pre-approval. And now his mom is co-signing, so we need to add her to the contract, in which case we don't just go back to the fully signed purchase agreement and plug in the person's name. We go ahead and do a contract modification or just an addendum to the purchase agreement stating buyer and seller agree that we're adding this person, or any of the details like that is handled in an addendum. But once you have everything fully signed, one of the first things you're going to do is collect that earnest money check. And I know that several of you guys have been in some pretty hot water lately. Like I think there's 3 or 4 of you, we'll hear Charlie chuckle, I know, who's had some situations with earnest money lately, because the buyer kept saying, I'm going to get it to you, I'm going to get it to you, I'm going to get it to you, and then they didn't. And then the buyer wants to void the contract, and that's when we have a problem, because they never collected the earnest money, and now you have to go back and tell the listing agent, my buyer wants to void the contract, and they're breaching the contract, in fact, and we never collected earnest money. So make that a top priority. More people get their license suspended for mishandling the earnest money than anything else. So it's a top priority. And no, it can't be cash. I love when people ask, can I bring my earnest money in cash? No, we are not a cash business. You don't come with a briefcase to closing. And I'm sure Andrea can tell you, there's been many of cash people that say, can I bring my briefcase of money? Dear God.
In Southwest Florida.
See, you can't make that up. Like, seriously, it's craziness. We're not in the wild west. This is not a handshake business, and we don't just show up with cash. So those are funny questions that we get all the time. So the answer is definitely no. And I know we run into a lot of situations because people don't have checking accounts with checks anymore. So they're like, well, gosh, what do? I don't have a check. And I'm pretty sure the lender wants to see the earnest money come from the buyer and not like a relative. So they can do a cashier's check. Can they wire to Stonegate? So yes, so they can wire money for earnest money. So not every title company takes a wire for earnest money, but Stonegate does. Another reason why we like to use Stonegate. So there's a couple of options. Or when the buyer's from out of town, and they're not here and they need to do earnest money, or they're on vacation. I think Chris had a situation where his buyer was on vacation after they got under contract, and then he waited till he got back from vacation to do the earnest money. They could wire it, and they can wire money from out of the country even. So I can't say it enough that it's a top priority.
Can I speak a little bit?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
So for those of you online, this is Andrea Hyatt from Stonegate. So to go along with what Gina said, Ohio is a good fund state. And so that earnest money has to be deposited and cleared before something can actually close. So that's one of the biggest reasons. I mean, yes, there's a whole bunch of law about earnest money with you guys and company policy, but funds have to actually clear the bank, and the lender needs to see that if the deal is being financed before you can move ahead to closing, because those funds have to be accounted for. So that's just another thing to get in your head. If you are slow at getting that earnest money, and it is going to be a check, if it's a personal check, because it can be that. If it's a small amount, well, small amounts figurative, under $10,000, but it has to clear. So if you ever run into that situation, a wire is a really good idea, because those are immediate funds and we don't have to wait for them to clear. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Please interject at any point. If anyone has any questions, jump right in. We do not do so this is incorrect here because this is not updated. As of last year, we don't take earnest money to KW. So you'll cross that right off this sheet, and the earnest money should be made out to the title company. We used to hold earnest money in escrow here and then go ahead and send it over at closing, but we no longer do that. We will not accept a check for earnest money any longer. So that should go to the title company. And then the question always becomes, well, who's responsible for that? Who's responsible to get the money to the title company? You are. You don't want to send your client to the title company with the earnest money check because you need to make a copy of it. It needs to get in dot loop, and then you need to share a copy with the listing agent. So you should meet up with your client and collect their earnest money, and then you go ahead and turn it in. Because again, here's where we come into problems. Oh yeah, I turned it in, and they in fact did not turn it in. I mean, I recently had an agent, I'm so sad to say, and I won't say who, at this office, who sold a listing of mine, and I was on her repeatedly about the earnest money, and guess what she said? She lost it in the back seat of her car somewhere. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So go back there and retrieve it. How do you lose it in your back seat? So that tells me it's a very unorganized person with lots of crap in her car, and that's how she could lose it. Well, I'm like, I don't care. Get another check, you know? So we don't just throw things in a file in your back seat either. So collect your earnest money.
If I could
Yeah.
just interject too, you are entering a contract and you need to respect that contract. If you don't have earnest money, you will be in breach
Yeah.
of the contract.
That's true.
So I try to, if I'm talking with newer agents, I tell them, this is a contract and we need to respect what it says in this contract.
So really learning that, educating your client is the important part so that they understand that. And quite honestly, I let them know those expectations when I'm going over like their buyer packet with them, or when we're walking through houses, or they're starting to talk about making an offer. I let them know the things that they can expect are going to come up or to happen. So one of the things we talk about is, oh, by the way, I don't know if you ever heard of earnest money. This is what it is. This is what it's for. It's not an extra fee. And yes, in fact, they will cash it. So I've had people say, but will they cash it? Of course they're going to cash it. They don't just hold your paper check. It's as good as a piece of paper then. So yes, we can't say enough about earnest money. Any questions on that? All right. So then you're going to, of course, have already created your loop, and we do like for you to start your green sheet right away, just because for our numbers here at KW, we like to know what's coming up and what's pending. Even if it needs to be changed, you should start working on that right away. Share your contract with the title company, share your contract with the mortgage company. So as a listing agent, you'll still share your contract with the title company. You don't share it with the lender because you represent the seller, but the agent will do that who represents the buyer. That's their responsibility with their client. So like the title company is going to get the paperwork from both people. They're going to get it from the listing agent and they're going to get it from the buyer's agent. But that's also how you trigger for the title company to know that you're representing this file. So you're also going to do that on both sides of the transaction. Home warranty. So if there is a home warranty sold on the property, depending on who sold the home warranty is going to submit the application. So if your buyer asked for the seller to pay for the home warranty in the transaction, just because the seller agreed to pay for it doesn't mean the seller's submitting the home warranty. The buyer's agent's going to do that. If you want to get the referral fee of either $100 or $75, you have to then do the data form, which has the serial numbers and makes and models of all the appliances and all of the things in the house, like furnace, AC, all of that. You don't get the referral fee if you don't fill out that form. I typically would bring that with me to the home inspection and get that information at that time. If the seller was already offering the home warranty with the transaction, then they will submit the application. It doesn't matter who's paying for it. It matters who asked or offered it, if that makes sense. Go ahead.
Sometimes there will be a home warranty provided with the listing.
Yes.
I go by what the purchase agreement says.
Of course.
So
Yes.
if the purchase agreement does not ask for a home warranty, the seller's not obligated.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, everything on the purchase agreement is superseded
Mhm.
by anything else that was out there. Typically, what happens though in that situation is the agent was offering it or the listing was offering it and the buyer didn't read remarks or something like that, and the agent didn't, and they didn't put it on the contract. But maybe the seller already did put it in place and we'll still have it added later. But yes, it should be, because you wouldn't know if it wasn't on the purchase agreement for sure. So keep that in mind as well. Make sure if there is inspections, you get them scheduled right away. Here's another thing about inspections. Actually, Jackie just called me on my way in and asked, she has a listing and the buyer's agent called her and said, do you have a well and septic inspection? She's like, should I? No, you're not required to have a well and septic inspection just because you have a listing. Sometimes agents think when they're in a county that there's a point of sale inspection. So Summit County requires point of sale. Stark County does not require point of sale well and septic. They require a septic inspection be done within 6 months of the transfer. Summit County, however, is point of sale. So that means it has to be done before it can transfer. That doesn't mean that the burden of the cost of the inspection should fall back on the seller. That's still negotiable. So of course, what I told her is just let them know, no, the seller didn't have it inspected yet. And if they write an offer, they can certainly make their offer contingent on those inspections, and they can also pay for them themselves, or if they're asking the seller to pay for them, that's going to be part of the negotiations. So be mindful of the counties that do things differently. It even sometimes comes down to cities do things a little bit differently, especially as we go further north. So like I know in the city of Stowe, there's a meth disclosure that when you list a property there has to be filled out with the listing and has to be signed by both buyer and seller, because obviously they've had some issues, I guess, in Stowe with meth labs and houses. So just be mindful, especially when you're listing properties, that you know where you're listing something and what the rules and regulations are of that county or city. So like whenever someone says, so like Mary Lou, you were going to be listing your sister's house up in north, we don't do things the same way in Stark County as they do things in Cuyahoga County. So there's a whole learning experience of that, because they do things a little bit differently. So just be mindful of that, but make sure that when you represent the buyer, you get your inspection scheduled right away, because you will run out of time very quickly. And that 7 days or 10 days that you've put on your contract is going to come fast. And it doesn't mean that you'll have it scheduled by then. It means that it will be completed by then. And not only completed by then, but if you're going to be asking for any repairs, you need to have your ROC or repair request submitted by that deadline. Okay, so make sure all those things get done. Another one that tends to get, for some reason, confused is the pest inspection. Who's ordering the pest inspection? Is it the agent that represents the buyer, or is it the agent that represents the seller? So sometimes no one orders it, and then we get to the point where we're like, oh gosh, the lender's asking for the pest inspection and it didn't get ordered. And again, I know where the confusion comes from. It's because it depends on who's paying for it. So if the buyer's asking the seller to pay the pest inspection, that doesn't automatically mean they are going to order it. In my opinion, the buyer should always pick the inspector, even if the seller is paying for it. Doesn't mean that that will happen, but you need to have that open line of communication with the other agent to know who's going to schedule it. So if you ask the seller to pay for the pest because it's a VA, just clarify with the other side, are you going to order it or should I? In my opinion, not real estate law, in my opinion, the reason why I feel like the buyer should pick all the inspectors, no matter what it is because when they move in the house and then they find out they have termites and then they say, oh my gosh, we didn't know who the inspector was, the seller picked the inspector. Now suddenly we have a problem. So you save yourself that headache when you say, but wait, didn't you pick the inspector? Yes, I did. Well, then you have an issue with your inspector, not that the seller tried to find some neighbor who does it on the side or something, because they will automatically assume that. Any questions on any of that?
Gina, I
Yep.
got one.
Yep.
For the inspections for certain counties, that's for private properties, or is that public as well? Like for well and septic in Summit? Is that just for private properties?
So residential property, yeah, I don't know
Private
about
well,
commercial.
private septic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what
Let
I
me back
mean.
up. Yes, you're meaning not the property. You
Not the
mean
property,
if it's city water and city sewer, there's no inspections.
Gotcha.
If it's well and septic, that's not, so you're using the wrong word. It's not private property. So public water, public sewer doesn't need to be inspected. That's part of the scope of a general home inspection.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? So keep this in mind. There's either city water or there's a well. There's either city sewer or there's a septic. So when there's a well and septic, you want to get those
You need another
inspected
person, don't you?
separately.
I have run into like
Private. So like if you're on a lake somewhere or someplace rural, sometimes neighborhoods will have its own private water source that everyone feeds into. Doesn't come up very often, but still that's not like the same as well and septic. So Zarice, what we're talking about is if there is a well or a septic. If it has public or private water or sewer, then there's no inspection needed outside of the scope of a home inspection. All right. I'll also mention this because this keeps happening as well. Radon inspection. If they don't check yes on the purchase agreement, they are not going to do a radon test. They are not. I'm not going to let my buyer do it. I'm never going to let a buyer on a listing of mine do it. They are absolutely not. So any inspection that they didn't check yes to on the purchase agreement, they are not doing it. I recently had someone say, but my buyer just wants to do it for their own information. There's no such thing, guys. There's no such thing as for my own information. If you want to do it for your information, do it when the house closes. So when they say for their own information, they just mean this. I won't ask for repairs. I'll either void the contract or I won't. That's still a contingency in the contract, which would have needed to be checked when they wrote their offer. They cannot come back later. So this occasionally happens. They get out to their general home inspection, and I won't name any names, but there's a particular inspection company, and I'm sure some of you heard me complain about them, who upsell their packages, and I'll never ever use them. It blows my mind that we even let them come here and do CE classes. But anyway, so if that tells you who it is, they will upsell. So they will try to convince the buyer to buy packages at the home inspection. And at the home inspection, they say, well, part of the package includes a radon. And then I get a call from my seller that says, why the hell is there a radon in my house? We never agreed to this. No, absolutely not. Get back over there and take it out. That's not part of the home inspection. You did not say yes on the purchase agreement. It's not contingent on that. And then I get, it's okay. They just want to know for their own information. Right. So when it comes back at 15, you're not going to threaten to void the contract. They can't unsee results from inspections, and it will become a problem that will make your deal fall through. I promise you. So we need to be very careful. If they want to do radon, they have to check it on the contract. And yes, in this hot market we're in, sometimes it comes down to inspections, including radon. If I have 17 offers and this guy's not doing any inspections and you're doing a radon, you're probably not going to get your offer accepted. So what they need to understand if they have issues about stuff like that is, so what? So test it after you buy the house. And if it comes back high, pay the $1,000 yourself. I mean, you're willing to pay $25,000 over asking price, but you're not willing to take a house with radon. That's $1,000 remedy. Makes no sense to me, blows my mind every time. And so be wary of the people that say, for my own information. For your own information in what regard? So no, you can't just go adding those things later. Also really, really important. So besides the fact that you have to collect the earnest money and get that turned in, the buyer needs to have made their loan application within 5 days of acceptance. It says so. If you guys ever read the purchase agreement, it says right there in the first paragraph, 5 days for loan application. The second line says blank days for loan commitment. Every single time I proof an offer, and quite honestly, it surprises me when I get offers on my own listings that people will put like 3 days. It doesn't take 3 days to get loan commitment. It takes 30 days to get loan commitment. So I know why they're putting it there, because they think they're saying for loan application, but it already states that right in the sentence above. So that should always be 30 days, not 3, not 5, not 7. Loan commitment happens when we get clear to close. So that's close to when we're about to sign documents. So if you just kind of let that sink in, that can't be in 3 days. And if it's cash, then it's just NA. You don't need to worry about anything there. They won't be able to close on time if they don't make their application within the 5 days. So again, I love when we get all the way to the end and then they're like, oh gosh, we're supposed to close. We've got to get in where our house is selling. Everyone's got their own story. And what do you mean we need an extension? Well, you didn't make your loan application in the 5 days. So now things are delayed. Go ahead.
Is that 5 business days?
It is. It is 5
It
business
doesn't
days.
state that
In the purchase agreement?
does it?
Yeah.
It does,
Uh-huh.
5 business days.
It doesn't use the word business, but it says something referencing that. I'd have to look. Someone's asking something. Time frame. It doesn't say time frames on everything on the checklist, Jovan, but I mean, I can kind of run through that at a later date and tell you what should be done, but you're just focusing on, but it does say 5 days to make loan application, and you have your dates for inspections. If you wrote 7 days, it's 7 days and so on. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, the other big thing that causes delays is that the buyer doesn't get the lender the docs that they're requesting. And sometimes it kicks back out of underwriting, need more bank statements, need another W-2 from 2020, whatever it is. If the buyer isn't mindful and timely with these things, it is going to cause a delay. And then they're always the one having a tantrum about it when it was actually their own fault. So we want to keep our buyers on track with moving things forward with that. You also want to have communication, whether you represent the buyer or the seller, you have the right to contact the lender. So don't feel like as a listing agent, you don't have right to contact the lender. You do. The lender just can't tell you certain things, nor will we ever ask those questions. I want a weekly update as a listing agent from the listing on the lender. I want to know that they actually made loan application. And more importantly, did you in fact order the appraisal? So caution you this. There are lenders out there, I don't know who comes up with these hokey ideas, but that will basically tell their client, hey, Tammy, go ahead and tell me when you finish your inspection and that you got through it okay, and then I'll order the appraisal. That is a breach of contract. They absolutely should not be doing that. It's not any of their business to be telling their client, I want to save you $500 if this deal falls through. So what you did was you put that client in jeopardy of breaching the contract. So the appraisal has to be ordered at the time that the application is made, and not 2 weeks down the line when you've hashed out inspection stuff. The bank stuff runs side by side with the inspection stuff. It isn't a pause on everything. It all is kind of happening together. So do keep that in mind, because I know several of you have asked this question. Well, now that we have to get estimates on repairs, is that going to hold up the closing? No, because the lending isn't stopping. By the way, do not share your home inspections with the lender, for the love of God, please do not. Yeah, and although we have to include them on all addendums, you don't have to say the buyer and seller agree, the seller's reducing the price by $5,000. I had this conversation with Ken last night, because the roof leaks. You don't have to say why. You just can say that the price is being reduced, because depending on the underwriter, that could be a problem. We're not going to say the seller is going to credit the buyer $1,000 in lieu of mitigating for radon.
Or in lieu of repairs.
Or any repairs. So
Yes.
all you have to say is,
Price reduction.
the price is being reduced. You don't want to say why. It's not necessary to say why, and it will be a problem with the underwriter depending, and especially if it's a VA or FHA loan. So don't say that, because they're going to want to know what those repairs are. Questions on any of that?
I have a comment about lenders.
Yeah.
Lenders are famous for just sending back a quick reply to an email. Everything's on track. I ask very pointed questions.
Yeah,
Can you verify that the buyer has completed loan application?
Yes.
And is it moving to processing? Next
Nice.
week might be, was the appraisal ordered? You have to ask very pointed questions because they just want to blow you off.
They do. And that's another reason why when we represent buyers, guys, we want to be working with the people that we know and that we recommend, and we recommend them for a reason. We all know we don't get any kickback from them. It's not that we're working with someone because they're paying us to, that's illegal. We're working with our preferred vendors because they do a good job and they keep us posted on what's going on. So if you're working with a lender regularly, a couple of different lenders, they're probably going to reach out to you with an update and you won't have to go finding it. So that's another good reason to work with people consistently.
Gina, can I add
Yeah, go ahead.
to the agenda? So one thing to keep in mind is although you don't want to let the lender know what the things are, but for example, let's just say there is a chimney repair, or there is something, if the title company is paying it out of closing, please make
Yes.
sure that's on your escrow letter. We need to know as a title company, X amount of dollars, either, need to know, are we paying it out of closing? Did the client pay outside of closing? We need to know, and we need either invoices or receipts.
Yeah.
So that we can keep track of it, because your escrow letter and Colebrook's escrow letter are gonna tell us they have to match, yeah, and if they don't, then we're gonna go back and say, hey, guys, A plus B equals F somewhere. We
Yeah.
gotta figure it out. So although, yeah, you don't wanna, give the lender so much information that it puts your contract in jeopardy. Just remember, as a title company, we do have to see everything in writing, so that we're doing it the right way. Does that make sense? to everybody?
Does a lot of people, so I guess I'm always running into where this needs to be repaired before closing because we need the appraiser maybe to go back out because it could be an appraisal thing. So I haven't found on my contracts, maybe I just haven't offered it. You're paying for it. We're not paying for it at closing. We're paying for it now. So do you have a lot of people paying repairs out of their proceeds then?
So what we see is people will say, well, we're gonna put money in escrow.
Okay,
So after.
after
closes,
closing.
Then we see a lot of that.
Gotcha.
Well, then why don't they just reimburse themselves? Okay, or they just don't have the cash or.
I mean, there's like a
Yeah.
million different
Yeah, could be
reasons.
that.
Well, because lowering the purchase price doesn't put the money in the buyer's pocket to make the repair
Right.
at all,
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
So if it's not substantial, I mean, again, there are those people that want to see that purchase price as low as possible. And right now, guys, go for it. That's what I told Ken on his, because it might not appraise anyway. So it's better if we get that price down so we don't run into that problem. Then the buyer thinks they got a win and the seller came down and now we don't have to argue over appraisal. But yes, I mean, I guess occasionally we've had situations. I know when I was on Jose's team, we had a driveway situation where it needed to be replaced and the seller didn't have 10 grand and we held it in escrow out of proceeds to have it happen after closing. So those are those kinds of things. So that's an option. But if you have a question about doing that, come to me, go to Andrea, find out how you want it to be written so that we have it done correctly. And yes, do you charge for the escrow? To hold? Yeah. No. Okay. All right. All right, great. And as for your ROC goes, so when you're writing your release of contingency, you're writing it pending the items below. So you're checking things on that ROC that say, yes, we're releasing the pest. Yes, we're releasing the well, we're releasing the septic, but we're going to release the home inspection subject to repairs that are listed below. Be very specific on your repairs. I will say this, I'll give you a good example. I've gotten a repair request from an agent on a listing of mine, and all she did was make statements. And it just said this: chimney cap is missing. Crack in driveway on curb. Leak on kitchen faucet. What does that mean? I actually went to my seller and said, now listen, I'm not going to do anything to antagonize this transaction. However, if we sign this, you don't have to do any repairs. Because they didn't ask for any. They asked for no repairs.
Yeah.
Never even said seller agrees to repair.
Yeah.
She just was saying And again, I'm sad to say this is someone who sells a lot of real estate, so I'm like embarrassed for her. It's ridiculous. I called her and I said, listen, I'm not gonna be a jerk because I don't want to do anything to jeopardize a transaction. So I said to my seller, here's what could happen though. We can sign it and be jerks about it. And then we get to closing and the buyer wants to know why the heck these repairs weren't made. They're gonna be mad at their agent that they wrote it wrong, and then they're gonna bail on us. And then we're gonna have a voided contract. And then we'll have to start all over again. You're trying to get to Oklahoma. It's not worth the couple $100. We should just tell them how to correct it. And so I called her and I said, listen, I don't mean to be a jerk, but what the hell is this? You know, like this is not a request of anything. We could, and I went down and I told her what we could do. I said, it needs to say this: buyer and seller agree to the following. Seller will make the following repairs or replacements. Number 1, flashing around chimney and cap to be installed. See page 10 of home inspection report. And I always notate the page from the report and include the whole report to them with the buyer's permission, of course, because I want them to see specifically, sometimes even with photographs, what the home inspector is saying, because I've also had people fix the wrong damn thing. So we want to be very clear, very specific, and it's not a statement, it is a request. Go ahead.
Do you have to put that you want it to be a licensed contractor?
So it just depends on what it is.
So if it's something you feel like you want, then you put that.
I
If it's
do.
something that feel like whoever could fix it.
So like, for example, there's the, sometimes I've seen that the man door to the garage has rotted wood underneath the floor plate. If somebody wants to go in there and put a 2x4 under there, it's not rotted, they don't have to be a licensed contractor. That's a handyman job. But I will say that it needs to be a licensed professional of buyer's choice. If it's a plumbing, if it's electrical, if it's roofing, if it's anything that's not handyman specific, then I am going to say, but I'm also going to say of buyer's choice. It's negotiable. So if the seller comes back and says, but we know someone and the buyer's okay with that, then I'm okay with it. Here's why. If the seller hires somebody and they just picked anybody and the buyer moves in and this isn't what I expected, I'm so mad, we should have picked our own contractor. At least then I can go back to my ROC and said, well, remember when I told you we should pick the contractor? And then when they countered with, we're going to pick it, you agreed to it. So we tried to say that, but we negotiated that it was okay. Because I've also had buyers where they're like, I don't want to be bothered picking contractors. I don't know of anybody. And even though we can provide a vendors list, I've actually had a situation where I did represent the buyer and they were from out of town and they didn't want to be, they wanted as least amount of fuss as possible. And they were perfectly fine with the seller deciding on whoever the contractors were. And guess what? The seller ordered a radon kit online and installed the radon himself. And it was very visible that he did. He just put it right into the sump pump, just dropped a PVC pipe in there, bought a fan that was $500. And when we went through the walkthrough, that is not what they expected, but they were okay with the seller making his own repair. And that's what happened. And then it ended up costing the seller another $1,000. So he saved nothing because it did say from a licensed professional and he is not. So be careful of that from your sellers as well. I even just recently had a listing where she had her boyfriend fixing a couple things. And I'm like, well, that will fly for these 3 things, but you need an electrician. I don't care what he knows and whatever he does, he's not an electrician. So be wary of those kind of things and just keeping it very clear on the ROC especially. Let's see. Can't see. So keep in mind too, that the close date on the purchase agreement is a target date. I've heard many of you say, my buyer won't be in town on the date of closing. And I'm like, how do you know when the date of closing is? Well, because it says so on the contract. That's a target date. It says on or about. That means it's a target date. You can't possibly be sitting in a house someplace 30 days ago and know when the closing is gonna happen. You don't know when the lender is gonna be ready, and you certainly don't know what the schedule of the title company is. So that is not the close date. That's the target on or about date. So just make sure that you aren't telling your clients that that's the actual, make sure you take off work on the 30th because we're closing. I know it's only the 8th, but you better take off on the 30th. That is not the case. You do not schedule the closing. The title company schedules the closing. They can confirm it with you if you'd like, but they will contact once they get the package, because we also get this a lot. We've got clear to close. That doesn't mean that the title company has the package from the lender. So there's a lot of things and a lot of moving parts that have to do with other people. So if you make representation about something, they aren't going to blame the lender and the title company. They're going to blame you. And that's why then you're calling and battling it with the lender and the title company because, oh my gosh, I have to get them in. They thought they were getting the keys today. That's a big mistake because you need to set the right expectation right from the start. That leads me right into the same conversation about possession. If possession is at recording, it's at recording. On our contract, it says possession at closing. Closing is defined at recording. Closing is not defined when they go and sign the papers. No one will ever get keys at the closing, ever. They will get keys when the deed records. The listing agent's not going to give them up before recording. I'm not going to give them to my buyer or seller before recording. If they sign on Friday at noon and the seller doesn't sign till 4, it's going to be Monday. If Monday is Martin Luther King Day, it's going to be Tuesday. So be mindful as the holidays start to come as well. That's a big, Thanksgiving week's a big problem for closings. Don't choose that week for your closing. Choose the week before, the week after. Same with Christmas, depending on where New Year's and Christmas falls. Those are a lot of days that there's places that are closed and things aren't happening and people think they're getting the keys. I mean, I literally, when I was over at Cutler, had a buyer show up to closing with a U-Haul truck at closing. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Because they thought they were leaving with the keys and going to the house. They weren't. And it was a holiday weekend. So it was a nightmare, as you can imagine. And even though I said to them, I said, oh gosh, Tammy, remember when I said, let me make it crystal clear that you won't get the keys at closing? I'm just not sure why you came here with a U-Haul truck. No matter what I can say, I'm gonna need to start recording those conversations because I say the same thing every time. Let me make it crystal clear. You will not get the keys at closing. You will get the keys when the deed records. Or we run into this problem a lot too. 7 days possession. 7 days starts from the day of recording, not from the day of signing. So if they signed on Friday and it didn't record till Monday, day 1 is Monday. The 7 days will go from there. So be careful about that. I love when buyers say, but I know the house is empty. I watched the sellers move. I'm not sure why you were over there watching the sellers move. They're creepers. And I love when people out it like as if it's a perfectly normal thing to do. And it doesn't matter that they moved out. What matters is they still have the keys till next Tuesday and maybe they want to go back and clean and maybe they left other things. I mean, you just don't know. So those are some serious situations. Go ahead.
To Gina's point, there are some, like if you have people from out of town, there are some other states that they will do escrow closing and that they will get keys. So just, that could be just a reminder for you guys, if you have somebody that is from not around this area, maybe iterate it twice. Let me be crystal clear. Have that conversation twice with them.
Yeah.
We operate differently here than maybe you did in North Carolina. There are some attorney states that operate differently. Some states, some areas where they buyer and seller are together at the same table type documents. Okay, so there are different areas that practice things and closings different. Okay, so
And people love to carry over their other transaction.
absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times, even if they're in the same state, well, we gave the keys to the buyer.
Right.
So they think that the seller is supposed to do the same thing for them, or we didn't ask for those repairs, and they think that because they didn't, that's not gonna happen on the other end. So I have to try to keep them on track of, this is two different transactions entirely. And this transaction's going on this path and that transaction's going on that path, because that makes it really difficult. Did you have a question, Paige?
I have a question. I was just gonna say, when I was in Alabama, my dad's realtor, and when I go to closings with them, they would get the keys. at
Okay,
closing.
yeah.
So,
And it was also a thing 25 plus years ago.
but I think that
Yeah,
because
right.
it's a small town and it's like down by the water, it's next to the bay, like, I think they were just.
Sure, if the
content
seller
with-
wants to give up the keys, like I've had people go back to back closings and then they meet in the lobby and the seller is like, yeah, we're already out. Matter of fact, we brought the keys and garage door openers here. Here you go. I don't recommend it, but if they want to do it, then it's up to them. I don't even give people the idea that we can ask the seller for special permission. Don't get into that. That gets really ugly because weird things happen where something didn't get approved on the, well, Andrew will tell you that when they send the package back to the lender to reapprove all the signed stuff, something went wrong. A million things can happen. And I promise you this, they don't happen when we do it the right way. They only happen when we do it the wrong way. But every time that someone doesn't order a pest inspection, it's a house that has carpenter ants every single time. So we have issues there. Go ahead, Mary Liz.
They would get the day of reporting or 7 days after.
Well, it depends on what your contract says. So if your contract says immediate possession, they get the keys on day of recording. If the contract says 7 days after closing, then it's on the 7th day after recording. Maybe it says 30 days after closing. And then it would be 30 days after the day of recording. So it just depends. Go ahead.
You use the term recording. Is that the same as title transfer?
It's filing at the county
Filing.
quarters. Yes, yeah, filing it, yes. So whether the title company e-files downtown or they deliver it downtown, wherever that downtown is, I'll also caution you, Wayne County, big problems. I don't know if they just work short hours. Andrea can probably touch on that. Carroll County, other places are not like Stark County or Cuyahoga County. I think they have 2 employees and they work twice a week or something like that. So now we have other big problems depending on the county, because maybe that recorder's office doesn't have a full staff and they don't work every day of the week. So when I say it'll be Monday, if it's in Wayne County, it could be Wednesday. And we'll get an email from the title company that says we're filed and recorded. And that gives us our go ahead to exchange keys. You should also, as a buyer's agent, be having a conversation with the listing agent prior to closing. And it should say, tell me how I can get the key. It's up to you, the buyer's agent, to go to the listing agent and say, how can I get it? The listing agent isn't going to be saying, hey, how can I get you the key? You're the one who needs the key. You should be seeking out the key. So you could say, do I have permission to take the key from the lockbox before you pull the lockbox? Once it's recorded, if I have a closing and I happen to be in an area where my sign and lockbox is, I might swing by and grab it. Or maybe I'm meeting my sellers for some reason or something like that. So I'm not going to leave it there till it records necessarily. It's going to be convenience. So maybe I'm already picking up the lockbox and sign, and then the key is going to be at my office at the front desk. So that's perfectly acceptable too, but you need to be communicating that with the other agent. If you're going to be scheduling a final walkthrough, that is something our contract says the buyer's allowed to do a couple days before closing. You're not required to do a final walkthrough, but if there's repairs, you might want to have your buyers go through and do a final walkthrough, because again, depending on what the repairs are, you might want to lay your eyes on it. If it wasn't something that was required to have a receipt, if there's a receipt involved, you want to get copies of those receipts for repairs, but maybe it was painting, maybe it was painting the ceiling, maybe it was touching up nail pops, whatever. You want to make sure that you go and see at a walkthrough. I've also had buyers go to a walkthrough where the seller took every light bulb in the house. They took all kinds of crazy stuff. When they were asked about the light bulbs, it was because they were the $9 a piece lifetime light bulbs. I don't care. That's attached. Bring them back. Or go to the freaking Home Depot and buy 99-cent ones and replace it. Lots of crazy things. Another big thing that comes up all the time are these damn TV mount brackets drive me crazy. They're wonderful, but I wish that in real estate they didn't exist, because it's always a thing. Is it an attachment? Is it not an attachment? So it is in our contract, guys. The TV mount is listed, but you have to check the box. If you don't check the box, then it doesn't have to stay. It's no different than shelving in a basement or shelving in a garage that's bolted to the floor. You need to be clear about it, because sellers think that's theirs. That's their thing that they built. That's their thing that they bought, or whatever it is, down to pegboard in a garage that hangs rakes. I mean, the stupidest things, and then the transaction falls apart. So those are the kind of things that you want to be looking at a walkthrough that they left. I mean, I actually once had someone take the hot tub, and it said the hot tub was staying, and they took the hot tub. And the reason they took the hot tub is because they sold it to the movers because it was broke, and they disclosed to my buyer that it was broken. My buyer said, that's fine, we'll just have it repaired, leave it. Well, when they were getting estimates on getting it repaired, the movers gave them a quote, that's what it was, on moving it. I'm not sure why. And the movers offered to buy it. So they sold the hot tub to the movers when the broken hot tub was supposed to stay. So I'm not buying a hot tub. They needed to be able to remedy the problem, and they just ended up giving the $500 they sold it for back to the buyer, but still no hot tub. So lots and lots of reasons why we might want to do a walkthrough, because we don't want those calls later. I actually had a listing where I'm not sure why I was doing the walkthrough. I don't think I had the buyer, but I was doing the walkthrough, and there was 6 inches of water in the basement at the walkthrough, because the sump pump backed up, and my seller already had moved to Texas, and who knows how long that water had been sitting in there. So she had to pay a company to come clean it, fix the sump pump, all of that. And that was discovered at the walkthrough. Actually, I think I didn't do the walkthrough. The agent called me, and I was in the area, and I ran over there, and I was like, oh, thankfully it was a pretty brand new house, and there was nothing down there to damage, and it was still clean water, because it wasn't an old yucky floor, but still, again, a reason to do a walkthrough, especially right now with all the crazy weather we've had with rain and backed up basements. Questions on any of that?
Hey, Gina,
Yep.
on the final walkthrough, what is the recourse? In other words, you do the final walkthrough and there are several things or a few things, and you're like, okay, this isn't right. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. What can the buyer do? Can they say, I'm not
We're gonna
closing?
delay closing depending on, I mean, I wouldn't encourage anything, let them decide, but this is where I've used the example. I've had to buy dirt before, because it was my listing. The seller was supposed to bring in dirt to bring up the back foundation. I mean, around the foundation, around back, to make the property more level. They paid for 1 dump load of dirt, and the buyer was expecting crazy things. He thought that the dirt was going to be up to the window wells of the front of the house, which is crazy thinking, because no one's dirt comes up to, like, imagine you look out your window to flowers right there. Like, that's just unrealistic. But the buyer went to the walkthrough and said there should be more dirt. And the seller was like, you got your dirt. We're not bringing more dirt. So guess who paid for dirt? I did. Not because it was my mistake or my problem, because I want $3,000 or deal falls through, pay $500 for dirt. I'm willing to do it, but I split it with the other agent. I'm like, listen, we're 2 days from closing. I don't want to mess around with this. My seller's absolutely not going to do it. And the buyer absolutely wasn't going to move forward. So in those situations, only when push comes to shove will I pay for dirt. But in that case, I split the cost with the agent just so that we can move forward to closing. So yeah, I mean, it's a threat. It is, hey, you didn't fix this, or hey, you didn't do it how I thought. And then we just have to do what we have to do. I don't recommend paying for repairs and things, but if you can see that you're not going to get someone to move, and I believed my seller, like, they would have been taking their chances with the house going back on the market. They would have been perfectly fine to do it. So yeah, that's it. You just delay closing, unfortunately. Which can cause a whole nother bit of problems. The rate could be locked only till then. Documents that the seller already signed need to be re-signed. I mean, it's a lot of problems when you delay closing over it, so I don't recommend it. One other thing I want to mention, and then I'm going to bring Andrea up, is utilities. This is a biggie, guys. When you represent the buyer, you need to remind them prior to close date that they need to contact those utility companies to get everything set to turn in their name as of blank date. So they will want to know when the closing date is. So it's going to be crunch time. they're gonna know closing is in 3 days, and that's when they're gonna call the utility companies. They need to be able to do that, or they can call a week before and just say, I'm the person that the utilities names are gonna go into. So that way, when the seller calls to have them transferred, you'll already have my information. So that's the best way to handle that. And for your sellers, Mr. Seller, do not, Ken, do not turn off the utilities. I know you're inclined to do it, but don't do it. Because then we've got reconnect fees for the buyer. And who do you think the buyer is going to go to for reconnect fees? The seller. They should not be turning their utilities off. They should just call and say, have them out of my name as of this date. And then as long as the buyer called, they won't be shut off. However, if the seller says have them out of my name for the first of the month and the buyer didn't call, the first comes around, they will be shut off, and therefore it will be the buyer's responsibility. And I promise you, it's not, I have heard this before many times. Oh my gosh, they can only come out between 2 and 8. I won't be there. Can you go sit and wait for the utility companies? Yeah, no, that's never, ever, ever happening. That's calling not in your lane, over service. I would never, for any reason, don't be bullied into doing it. It was their mistake to begin with. So keeping in mind, you can get the utility company information from the listing agent. Some agents will just send it on to you. Otherwise, you might have to hunt it down. So does that make sense? And these are all things that come up all the time. Also, this just happened. Your sellers should make sure all their utilities are on for the inspection and the appraisal. Jackie is at a home inspection as we speak, and the water's been shut off because the seller moved. They cannot shut off the water before the inspection and the appraisal. That they can't inspect the plumbing then. So when you represent sellers, make sure they don't turn those damn utilities off before that. Hopefully they just turn the valve, and hopefully the home inspector is willing to turn it back on. They aren't always. And it's not at the street because they need a special key to turn it back on at the street if the water's off. If it's your listing, pick up your lockbox and sign. I would say you want to probably attend your closings. It's your chance to say thank you and goodbye. Give us closing packet, gift. You might do a gift at the exchanging of keys, that kind of thing, and then add them to your past client database. Okay. I don't want to go over too much. So Andrea, want to take it away? I'll switch spots, come down there.
Do I need to like sit in front of the camera of your computer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna give you guys each one of these. So the first flyer is for the CE class that's coming up. It is September 2nd, and that's gonna go. It's gonna go really nitty gritty into this. Hi. We're getting the contract to close. Can y'all see that? We're passing this out right now.
It's in the Google Drive.
Oh, it's in your Google Drive. You can hear Gina. I don't know. I don't need to repeat her. I'm like a stander and I talk with my hands. So this is going to be like hard for me to like go back and forth. Okay. So the first thing is our CE class is September 2nd. And then secondly, that's going to go nitty gritty into contract to close. Okay. But this is going to be a nice, you know, what do they say? 30,000 foot overhead drop of what it looks like from the title company's perspective when you guys go through closing. This sheet is really great to give to your clients because you don't have to have all the knowledge in your head. You can just pass it across the table to your clients and say, hey, hang this on your refrigerator. This is going to help you to know what's going on. And they're not going to ask you a million questions. Okay, they are going to ask you a million questions, but at least you have something to refer back to and you don't have to like think, do I know all of this? Am I saying this in the right order? This is going to really, really help you guys. Secondarily, I just want to encourage you guys, Gina is a wealth of knowledge. You guys could not have a better teacher guiding you guys through this. Listen to what she has to say. She will save you from so much heartache, and she's going to help you set those proper expectations. And that is the biggest thing with your clients, is setting the proper expectation so that when things go wrong, because they will, because it's real estate and it is very messy and every transaction is different. If you can set the proper expectations, then they're not going to be disappointed in the future. So listen to her. Okay. She will be your angel sitting on your shoulder, guiding you. So anyways, just a little shout out to Gina. So, okay. So, first steps, your client has got pre-approved if they're the buyer. If you represent the seller, obviously you're doing all your stuff with getting everything listed. So you've got a contract. 1,000,000% of the time, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side, Gina already said this. Who sends the contract to the title company? It's a trick
Both.
question.
Everybody.
Everybody. If you're on the buyer side, if you're on the seller side, always please send it to the title company. I cannot tell you how many phone calls I have gotten. Hey, I'm just checking out 123 Main Street. We don't have that.
order.
We don't have it. Nobody sent it to us. So just send it all the time. I'd rather get it a million times.
But so what?
Absolutely. I'd rather get it a million times than not once, because then everybody's going to be scrambling. And that's when mistakes happen, when everybody's like, freaking out. Okay. So always send it to the title company. Earnest money, Gina went over that in detail with you guys. So important. Make sure you just keep a copy of it. Okay. Make sure that you know where it's at. Also, I highly advise that you do have it with the title company and not with the co-broke company. There are some real estate companies out there that they will hold the earnest money. You guys, a title company is a third disinterested party. They are working on behalf of the contract to make sure it's executed properly. The co-broke agent and their brokerage is working on behalf of their client. Keep that in mind when you give them the earnest money. Okay. If something happens, if that deal goes south, you want a third neutral party handling that earnest money, because things will go south with earnest money.
And I'll mention this too. So I had a listing that fell through, the buyer just didn't come to closing, and Berkshire Hathaway was holding the earnest money. Now I had unfortunately no control because the agent at Berkshire Hathaway refused to have the title company, which was Stonegate, hold the earnest money. Well, I represented the seller, so I wasn't writing the contract, right? So they would not switch it. So Berkshire held the earnest money, which was only $500. Nonetheless, the buyer doesn't show up to closing. Matter of fact, I don't know that she's ever been seen again. She just didn't show up, fell off the face of the earth. Nonetheless, Berkshire would not give us the earnest money due to the fact that they wanted my seller to do not a W-2, some type of W-9 form to claim it as income.
Wow. I have never heard of that.
And so like we battled with them, and their accounting department refuses to release any earnest money at any time unless the person who's receiving the earnest money fills out a W-9 and claims it as income.
I've never heard of
Isn't
that.
that I think it's just a Berkshire Hathaway thing.
We had that issue with Howard Hanna.
Oh,
And I have had my very savvy, experienced agents argue they will not use barrister's title.
right.
Is this a deal breaker? We're not going to use them, and they don't really go into a big explanation why, but for those reasons,
Yes.
you're protecting
You're protecting your client.
Yes.
because that is truly an escrow agent,
Mhm.
not some
Mhm.
brokerage
Yeah.
in-house
Absolutely.
escrow.
And you guys, just for further information for you, title companies have very, very strict rules on money and the accounts that we can hold money in and releasing funds. And there are legal protocols that we have to follow that protect you and your clients and everybody. And, we deal with money, all the time. And so we know those rules and we follow those rules, and we're regulated and we're audited, but a brokerage may not be. So just food for thought. Okay. All right. So you can see on here, we've got Stonegate begins their title search and lender is going to begin their underwriting. Okay. So I've got those things stacked on top of each other, running parallel, because like Gina explained before, everything really does go together. Like we're literally in a boat and we're all rowing together. Okay. So the lender is going to, they're going to do the credit pool on your client. They're going to check for bank statements. They're going to ask to see their underwear drawer and everything. Make sure you tell your clients that when they're getting financed, especially if they're first time home buyer. I'm sure Gina's gone over this too. It's going to be awkward that when they ask for like random things in another letter, and what was this 2 cents for? As soon as they can get it,
tell them to give that information to the lender. Same thing with the title company. You guys, there are reasons why we ask for documents and we ask for all these things from your client. We are going to send a preliminary intro packet to your client, which is going to ask them for their social security number. Okay. That's probably the number one thing is, why does the title company need to know my social security number? Okay. So when you own property, you pay taxes. It's based on your social security number. You open a credit card. It's based on your social security number. When we are pulling our search and we're seeing what is associated and what is attached to you, like if you have a name that is very common, let's just say John Smith, there's going to be a million things attached to John Smith. Okay. The only way for us to rule those out, that it's not John Sylvan Smith versus John Allen Smith, is okay, like, was it a clerical error? I mean, we can see it's a different middle name, but we don't know the social security number. That is how we are going to rule liens out. So it's very important. Just so you guys know, and so you can share this with your clients, we do have extra security on all of our emails are encrypted. We send things encrypted to our clients, and when they fill out those documents and send them back, there's a button that they push so that when they come back to us, that those are encrypted. We have everything on a secured server. We shred any paper documents after the closing. So we have rules and regulations for people's documents. Okay, just so you know, and can help give a little bit of peace of mind to your clients. Now, if your clients flat out refuse, just say, okay, that's okay. If you don't want to write it down, can you please just call the title company and verbally give it to them? If they feel better with that, okay, that's totally fine. We can accept that. Okay. Same thing with like loan numbers. Okay. Something for your clients to understand is that a home equity line of credit is considered a mortgage. And yes, it does have to be completely closed out before that home can transfer. Okay. So for example, if we're asking for more information from your seller on things, it's because we found something in our search and we need some more information to completely clear that. It's not because we're trying to be jerks and we want to hold up closing and I can't believe they're asking for all of this information. Sometimes it gets a little emotional because somebody might say, well, I don't have anything on that home equity line of credit. Like I took that out, 10 years ago, and yeah, sure, I had a $15,000, HELOC, but I don't have anything on that. Well, technically, you have $15,000 that you really, it's open, it could be spent. So we've got to close that out, and we need your permission, your client's permission rather, to do that. Secondarily, on the bottom of our authorization form, those preliminary documents, easy for me to say with braces on, for your sellers, it's going to give us authorization to act on their behalf to get those liens cleared out. Okay. Some lenders will accept an electronic signature. Some lenders will not. Okay. So if you've done everything electronic with your clients and that's great. We love modern technology. It's a really great thing. However, some lenders still want a wet signature. So we may have to come back and say, hey, we do need a wet signature on this payout because the bank will not accept an electronic one. So just another thing. So when your client calls you and they complain about how awful, the title company is because now that we have to redo these documents, it's really because we're getting some pushback from the lender giving us the payoff. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, so lender's going to order the appraisal. Yep, they should be doing it, right away, just like Gina said. Our search is going to pull everything that's attached to this property, and it's attached that needs to be paid off in order so that the new buyer owns 100% of the property. Okay, so that nothing is going to transfer over to them. All right, after we do our search, we give what's called the commitment. Have you guys heard that word before? It's basically our promise of everything that we have found and everything we're going to clear off of the search to the lender. Okay, so the lender's going to get that and they say, okay, we see that the mortgage needs to be paid off, there are property taxes, and there's this miscellaneous thing. As long as all of those things are taken care of, then yep, we can lend on this. So it's really part of their underwriting process. Okay. So you can think of it when the lender and the title company are going through their process, it's really a volley back and forth. Okay. So we find something, we're going to hit it over to the lender. They say, okay, we can go the next step with our lending, and they're going to hit the ball back to us. Okay. So whenever you hear somebody saying, oh, we need this from title, please don't take that as somebody throwing title under the bus. I know it can kind of like catch you off guard and you can think, well, title's not doing what they're supposed to. It's really not that. It's just, hey, this is where we're at in the process and they can't get to their next process until we throw the ball back over to them. Okay. Same thing with title. We're not throwing anybody under the bus when we say, hey, we're waiting from this from the lender. It's just that lending has got to go through a couple of their processes and then they've got to volley the ball back over to us. Okay. I know that sometimes when you're going through transactions and when you're talking with other agents in other companies, it will feel like that. It will sound like that and people will get emotional. But something I want you guys to understand is it may sound and feel like that, but that may not actually be the case. Okay. So as the trusted advisor, as you guys are the ones that are going to be the cool, calm head with your clients, walking them through the experience, get all the puzzle pieces from both sides and be able to present it to your client in a way that makes sense and that isn't throwing anybody under the bus. Because like I said, we are all in the boat rowing together. We're not trying to paddle the other way from anybody else. We all want to get paid, right? So just remember that when you hear some of this like confusing language of what's going on and I don't know. And this is like, your first couple deals, you've got all this conceptual language going on, and then you're going to go through a couple of deals and you're like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. All these light bulbs are going to go off and you're going to like, look at this again and go, now I get it. So, okay. So we're going to release all of the liens. We're going to get all the payoffs ordered. We're going to get everything to the bank. The bank is going to call and they're going to say, you are clear to close because they've gone through all their underwriting process. And like Gina said, we're going to think, great, as agents, we're going to sign this tomorrow. Pump the brakes. Not quite. Okay. So there's three or four steps that need to happen before we can actually sign documents. Okay. First thing is we actually have to schedule the buyer, if they're being financed, to close. So we're going to call them and say, hey, the lender is ready. We're looking at this date. Are you available? We're going to schedule them. Then we're going to call the lender back and we're going to tell them what the date is. And then the lender has got to do their facts and figures and send them back over to us. And then we're going to check their math, make sure they're right. And then we're going to send our numbers back over to them and they're going to check our numbers. And we have to do this thing called balancing. Okay. And then we can give your client what their final figure is to come to the closing table with. So they're going to get off the phone. They're so excited. They've got it scheduled. And then they're like, wait, well, how much money do I need to come to the table with? Oh no, they didn't tell me what the final figure is. And they're going to get kind of worked up and they're going to call you or somebody's going to call. Or they're going to call us back and say, hey, I didn't get what my final figure was for closing. Well, unfortunately, the way that it works is it's actually going to be maybe a day or so before we can get them that final figure because we've got to balance back and forth with the bank. So prorations have to be done. Interest has to be calculated. There's a bunch of things that have to be calculated for that date of closing. Well, clearly we can't do that math until we know what the date of closing is. Okay. So it sounds a little bit backwards, but does that make sense? Okay. So we're going to schedule them for closing. We're going to balance figures and then they're going to come to the closing table. They're going to sign all their documents. And then from those documents, we're going to take them back to the bank if they're being financed. And the bank is going to check all 100 million pages of everything that they've just signed. My battery is running low.
I can look at my charter.
Okay. That's my train of thought. Oh, they signed 1 million documents. We've scanned it into the bank. The bank is checking the documents. They're checking for initials, signatures, dates. They're checking for mortgage fraud. They want to make sure that signatures match original loan application. That's a really, really big thing for lenders. There's like several fraud documents that your clients have to sign when they're, applying for financing about mortgage fraud. We had a case once where there was a kid sitting on somebody's lap. And so she was right-handed and she was signing something. And then like the kid was wiggling around. So then she used her left hand and the signature looked different. So the bank was like, what's going on? The signature is different. And so we had to explain verbally why it was different and they accepted it and it was okay. But understand like they are checking all of those. And if something is missed, if something's not done correctly, the bank's going to send it back and we've got to go back to the client and they've got to re-sign stuff or just fill in the date that was missing or the initial that was missing or whatever it was. Okay. Once that happens, then the bank is going to say, okay, you're good. We are now going to fund you. That means they're going to send us the money. Once we have the money in our possession, then we can go to the courthouse and then we can file. Okay. Once we're filed, that's when you can give keys. But hold up. With filing, it's like a 3-step process. We have to, well, there are some counties that will let us electronically file. And electronically file is not just you hit submit and boom, it's filed. Electronically filed means you hit submit, it goes to the courthouse, and there's actually a person at the courthouse that has to go and physically do all these steps. They're just allowing us to electronically give the documents to them. Okay, so the process inside the courthouse is first, it's got to go to tax maps. So tax maps is going to make sure that 123 Main Street is in fact 123 Main Street and that the legal description matches. Because if it's not, if things aren't the same, then they're going to kick it back and say, hey, this isn't right, blah, 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 and we've got to figure out how to fix it. After tax maps, then it's going to go to conveyance, and conveyance, which is the transfer tax, which in this area is typically $4 per thousand that the seller is going to pay. It's going to say, okay, this is going from Andrea Hyatt to Gina Ferrer. Okay, that's the conveyance form. And then lastly, then it's going to go to the actual recorder's office. That's okay. And that is where it's going to actual file the deed and the mortgage are going to file with the county. Okay, so when Gina says to you, if they sign papers at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not actually probably going to file. A, because a lot of counties close at like 3 or 3:30. And B, because after they sign those documents, remember, then we have to take it back to our office. We've got to scan it to the lender. The lender has to check all those pages and then they can fund us. And then we could go to the courthouse. Okay. So if you are running up against it and your clients say, hey, I've got to move on Friday. Note to self, schedule them for like Wednesday or Thursday to sign paperwork. That's going to save you a whole bunch of headaches. P.S. Think of closings as rush hour on the expressway. If everybody's trying to close on the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, that like last week of the month, everybody's trying to close, just like everybody's trying to get home at, between 5 and 5:30. So another good rule of thumb is like maybe the 26th is a good idea for closing. You're going to get better service and you're just not going to get jammed up. Things aren't going to be as slow. I just blew through that really fast. What questions do you have? No. Oh,
So
really?
thorough. Very good.
Oh, well, good. All right. So our class on the 2nd is going to go through nitty gritty through some of these other things. You will get a 1-hour elective credit for it. I would love to see you guys there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. My contact information is on the bottom of this paper. I'm always available for you guys to call, text, ask me questions, anything that you guys need. I'm here for you. Okay. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Ann, so
I'm
don't log
just-
off yet.
I'm
So
just
I just
gonna
want
say
you to introduce yourself and tell everybody kind of what you can do for them.
Well, I'm just going to say a quick hello because this has been probably one of the most thorough classes I have ever participated in. So congrats to your two great teachers. I'm happy to have an opportunity to say hello. I'm Ann Presley. And since October, I have been the KW Legacy and Elevate Transaction Coordinator. And my office is in Medina at the former Keller Williams Tri-County Properties office. And I am in the office Monday through Friday from about 8:30 until about 5. So I enjoy having that structured office. And if you ever need me, you'll find me there during the day. Essentially, my job is to ensure a smooth transaction from the time you go under contract to the time you close. As you can see, there's a lot of moving parts. And really what I am there to do is to help move the paperwork along and make sure that we meet all of the time deadlines and so forth. And the list that you were provided by Gina is a very thorough list. As a matter of fact, Gina, I've learned a couple things today, so thank you for letting me join and participate today. If you're at a point where you just feel a little overwhelmed with the paperwork and you just feel like, I really need a little leverage. I need to be able to offload some of this paperwork and this administrative so that I can spend some creative time doing things that are going to make me money. Because let's face it, paperwork is not going to make you money. If you're at that point and you're ready, I may be the leverage that you're looking for. And what I'd like to do is offer any of the agents that are on this call and anyone here in class, if you would like to give it a try, I'd like to offer you your first transaction with me at no fee. My fee is normally $225, not my fee, it's the brokerage's fee, but the fee is usually $225 and it is deducted right from your DA, from your commissions. So there's no messy having to write a check or Venmo me any money. I'm an employee of the company. And by the way, I only work for KW, Legacy, and Elevate agents. I don't do any outside work, although I have been approached by various co-brokes to want to do a little side hustle, but I do not. So if you would like to try me before you actually buy me, then anyone that calls me before the end of the day, and I'm going to make it like the first 5 agents that call me before the end of the day, if you have a contract going under contract very soon, or you're maybe even in the middle of a contract and just need a little help, you're struggling with some of the paperwork, take advantage of it. Let's get further acquainted. Let's see if the chemistry's right, and let's work together on one transaction. And hopefully after that one transaction, you'll see the value and you'll want to continue to work with me. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody ready to call me today? Anybody out there? I'll be back in the office probably within an hour. It takes me about an hour to get back to Medina. But I welcome your phone calls, welcome your questions. Welcome just to chat. If you want to just maybe spend a few minutes on the phone and get acquainted, have me go through my checklist, which is very similar to the one you were given today. I'm happy to do that. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for letting me come in and participate today.
All right, well, if you guys don't have any other questions, then we will just
Contact number?
wrap it up.
I have a contact number, absolutely. I have some cards I can.
Yeah.
So she'll pass out some information
I have
here.
some cards.
And guys, Ann's information is also, someone else had a question.
If you need a copy of the card or something.
I'm gonna drop it in the chat here.
Okay.
And you guys can find anyone's contact information, by the way, on the legacyguide.com. And what's your phone number?
Phone number is 440-781-7321. Email is A Presley, just like Elvis.
Uh-huh.
So it's A P as in Paul, RESLEY @KW.
All right, there you go, guys. All right, thank you guys all for being here. Awesome.
This millionaire model